All right, Sarah Fox, do we have you yet? All right, so we'll just have to hold on because we don't have a quorum to start yet.
Sarah Fox is in the waiting room.
I just admitted her and Nan, so we'll let her audio catch up and then I'll start the meeting.
Lisa just texted me she will not be making the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Michelle.
No problem.
All right, so we have a quorum. Megan and David are running a little bit late, so hopefully they will be on to join us in a little while. So I will call us to order at 5:02. So we've got just the one agenda item, which is the FY23 budget discussion before the presentation to FinCom this evening. So Sarah, I may kick it over to you because you were the one to ask for this meeting. So just you want to open it up?
Well, yeah, we left our meeting last week or a week and a half ago without their with a lot of things being out there. David had suggested the including the user fees for sports and extracurriculars. I had made some requests, and we had not had another meeting. So going into tonight, my question was, what is the number we're presenting and what does it reflect? And kind of that's what came out of this, is I felt that where we'd had some ideas put out there that are really actually very big numbers that could swing drastically one way or another, that we needed to, I thought, have a meeting with everybody to figure out where we are and what number we're presenting and what our justification is behind that.
All right, so I know that we had some documents from Michelle earlier this afternoon or this morning, I can't remember when they came in, sort of saying what was being presented tonight. So John or Michelle, do either one of you want to, because Sarah's right, we did toss out a few things. And so, where's your heads at this point?
Yeah, I will just give a general overview of the changes that have occurred in this tracking sheet since our last gathering or our public meeting. So basically, there were some discussions at the last school committee meeting, but the only changes that have occurred in the actual budget that's being presented to Finance Committee or requested at Finance Committee tonight is that Steve Poulos and I have got together. We have nailed down the payroll contractual obligation number. We have firmed that up to be $1,294,730. It's a little bit less than we had before. We had found that we were double counting stipends a little bit, so we've backed that out. So we've corrected that. We have moved the request for the smart panels for all 4 of our schools, excluding Brown, into a capital debt exclusion article. We've discussed this with John McGinn, and because it has a useful life of more than 10 years, he agreed that it could be part of the IT capital article that the town will be presenting. So that full amount, the $665,000, has been moved to that article. Originally, we had the $665,000. We reduced a portion of that to bring down to just leasing costs for 1 year. And then we further reduced that remaining balance of $235,000, or that remaining ask, to eliminate that from our operating, and that full $665,000 is in the capital article for the town IT needs. The next change that we've made is another point of discussion that has been tossed round and round, is the benefit costs for all of the new proposed positions. So Steve Poulos and I had met a couple times over this, and we arrived at an agreed number of $497,000, which would be the health insurance costs for roughly 30 FTEs to be added to our budget. So that is an agreed cost. We did add that here. We've heard that Finance Committee in the town wants to see this figure. While this will not be actually added to the school's operating budget, it is a direct relation to the increased staffing levels that we are requesting. So therefore, if this were to pass and the 497,000 got actually approved, it would go into the town's operating budget, not the schools, but it's to support the additional 30 staff members, the cost of those.
Can I pause you there, Michelle? So
Yep.
just procedurally, I want to make sure I understand how this works. So the town's operating budget, which our operating budget will be part of, will be an earlier article in the evening. That will pass or fail. I mean, we assume pass, it always does. And then later on in the evening, much later on, will be the article, if we choose to go for the override. If that override kicks in, that will trigger then this 497, but that original number has already been passed, 30 articles prior. So where does this 497 come from?
It will be within our operating override request. It is part of our request, but when it physically, if it shall get passed, it will actually be a town account. It won't be our account.
Okay, so it has to be built into the override.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then lastly, the one other change that we've made is the inclusion of security camera systems. This is an item that we've discussed previously. We had removed it from the operating budget with the thoughts that we were going forward with an IT capital article. In speaking with the town further, they are going with a debt capital override, which means that it has to have a useful life of 10 or more years. We are having trouble finding documentation. While we know a camera security system will last more than 10 years, whether that's actually a documented fact and would be arguable to bond counsel. So we have decided to remove that from a capital article and put it back into the operating budget because it really is an essential security item. In addition, originally this ask was for 2 schools. We have now finally had figures and we have put it in for all 4 schools, excluding Brown. So that's the additional 325,000. So with all those changes, it brings our total ask to $46,606,959. Right now, if you looked at just what our payroll and contractual obligations are, that is 3.4 million above the target that the town gives us. In further discussions today with Alec from the Finance Committee, I understand that the Finance Committee does not have any issue in supporting our request for special education costs in the amount of $848,000. So if you take our roll forward budget of FY22 of the 41.8 million, you add the payroll contractual obligations of the 1.2 million, and then you add the 848,000, the total budget that basically is non-controversial, shall I say, is a total of $43,982,273.
And that number, including the 848 for special education, will be embedded in what we all refer to as the operating budget, which will pass as the normal general town budget.
Correct.
Okay. And none of that 848 is embedded. We have no planned reliance on our special education reserve fund, correct? Nothing is being budgeted in that fund.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
So Michelle, just a couple of questions. If at some point, and I think this speaks to this sort of like that this is always kind of a moving target until it's done. If at some point you find some documentation somewhere, and obviously before town meeting and all of that, but that says the security cameras have a useful life of 12 years, will those be taken out of our operating budget at that point and then placed into a capital override? Or after we have voted our budget ostensibly on the 7th, does it stay put?
I don't think it's probable we're going to find any documentation. Everything I've been able to find says the useful life is between 5 and 20 years roughly. So where that bottom figure is 5 years, I don't think we're going to have any chance at documenting that. So
Okay.
that's why I was going back and forth yesterday. I'm like, while I'd love to have this in an article, I just don't think it's probable that it would be passed or approved that way through bond council, because it has a huge review process when you actually go out to bond for it.
Okay.
So I don't want to have, the townspeople vote for it, finance committee vote for it, and then all of a sudden the town be like, no, sorry, we can't move forward with it.
Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
recommend that this stay in the operating budget if it's going to be funded at all.
Okay. I will just note too, David just got on. So he's with us now.
My apologies. Traffic kept me from being on time. Good evening.
Welcome, David. Michelle, also, so there's been a lot of sort of movement with the smart panels and sort of where they were, how they were first presented to us. They went to leases. They're now moved to this other article. Is that still for leases, or is this a one-time purchase that then, because I know some of the concerns that we've talked about throughout this is that leasing makes a lot of sense, because then, even if they all last for exactly as long as they should last for, in whatever 10 years, we're going to be asking for another whole lump sum. Whereas the lease option made it so that there was fluidity and it actually put it as a recurring budget item instead of this one-time ask.
Yes, no, the full one-time ask will be included in the article, the whole $665,000 instead of
Okay.
leasing.
So just as a sort of a note then, assuming we're successful with all of these things, just future planning on maintenance and everything and replacement of those would be beneficial in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And then I will just say too that, although I think I have my head wrapped around this piece with the benefits for the new FTEs that we're hoping to add through this budget, I don't love the precedence of the sort of like us taking it on, but it's not really in our operating budget. It goes straight to town, but it appears that it's part of our ask. The town has always covered these things. And again, I have my head wrapped around it. I understand it. I understand the where the town is at with it. I just don't love it. So.
Absolutely.
And I'll comment. It's unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, since 2000, when I joined the finance committee until now, it's unprecedented. There are town budgets that have healthcare costs in them, but they are enterprise funds like Harbors and Waters, where they pay for their budget through fees. And so they pay back, or they have a debit line in their budget to pay for the health insurance. Water and Light is another group. They are on the GIC, but Water and Light pays us for their employees that are on health insurance. And so it's unprecedented, but these are unprecedented times, I guess, or they're challenging times. And I just wanted to, for purposes of this discussion, Michelle, can you just tell us how we arrived at, the cost of a healthcare plan for a family and the cost of a healthcare plan for an individual, and talk to us a little bit about how you vetted this number with Steve and others.
Yep, actually, I had Steve and I had different methods of calculating it. We arrived in the same ballpark, so we ended up using the lower of those two numbers, which is actually his method. So I'll take it and run with it. But so basically, we are looking at adding roughly, I believe it's 29.8 or 30 FTEs equivalents to this operating budget. So in terms of, while not every employee chooses health to elect to take our health insurance, unfortunately, it's a possibility, so we really should budget for it, or rather the town should be budgeting for it. So we took 50% of the eligible employees and costed it out for a family plan at roughly $26,000 per year cost to the town. And then we took the other half and assumed that we would be taking an individual plan. And roughly that cost is, it's either 11 or 12,000. I think I used 12,000 for that exercise. My number came out to a little bit higher than the 497, but Steve was taking the salaries times percentage allocation and coming up with a number, and he came up with a 497. We were both pretty close, and his number was a little bit lower, so we just went with the 497 for now. It's unlikely
Great.
that every employee would be taking our health insurance, but it's
Right.
something that the town should be budgeting for. Anyone who is eligible to jump on our plan at any time, they should be carrying that as well.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Vera?
So particularly where this isn't by no stretch of the imagination an insignificant number, this is $500,000. My question is, like you said, we have to budget as if people are taking it, but they may not. So where this is so unprecedented, first of all, one of my questions is, did we have any written agreement that the town pays for our benefits? Is there, or has it just been custom? Was there anything to go back to as far as a policy? Or is this just one of those, we've always done it this way things?
No, typically, the benefits by default are carried usually on the town side. It's actually an unusual situation if it were to be carried within a department that operates under the general fund operating budget. The departments that David had mentioned were enterprise funds. Enterprise funds have to function as if they're their own contained entity. They have to capture all their operating costs. We operate under the general fund. So therefore, all the general fund benefits are paid for by the town. So it would actually, right, but it would be unusual if we were to have a line item for school benefits. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist in certain towns. I've certainly seen a number of them, but it's rather unusual where you'll see benefits in more than one location within the general fund operating budget.
Okay. So to further,
right.
I understand what we're doing here, but to further, build on what Sarah said, it seems to me in a town where we live and die by the phrase, this is how we do things in Marblehead, we have started to divert from this is the way we do things in Marblehead in this unique situation to the detriment of the school budget by telling us we need to carry that. And that's really unfortunate considering we have been so collaborative the last several years. So that is unfortunate in my opinion, but here we are. And since it is, like I said, not an insignificant number, it is $500,000. How is this, what is our agreement? How is this going to work? If we, wind up hiring a lot of people, we tend to try to hire people at a lower step and bring them in, which a lot of times may be an individual who's still carried on their parents' plan or not on a full family plan. So if that number does come in below or well below that 500, where does that extra money just sit in the town coffers? Since we had to build that into our override budget, will that roll back into our budget for this year? Who gets use of that extra money that we would not be using if not everybody takes this benefit?
Well, where we would basically document that it is for town benefits, it would have to go into the health insurance, the group health insurance budget line item. Basically, it would be funded under that line item. It would then close out to free cash at the end of the year if it were not used. Yes. So it would essentially go back into free cash. It certainly would not come back to the school department directly because it's not within our operating budget. I mean, the school department has line item autonomy, which means that any line item under the school's budget we can use as we need. We can certainly go over in certain lines and under in certain lines. The town does not have that ability. They have to comply with their line items. They don't have the flexibility that the school department does. So
for anybody we hire that isn't taking this benefit, the town's, it will roll back into free cash.
Will generate free cash. Absolutely.
Okay. In the future, I mean, this is a town discussion, I guess, in a school department, but I'd like to look at incentivizing people when, there are companies, there are municipalities that incentivize people to go with their significant others health insurance benefit, and everybody wins. The individual gets a stipend, the town gets extra money. So I think we're leaving money on the table as a town by not looking at that. So we did not-
Sarah, I have brought that up previously to the town, and I would second that.
Yeah.
I brought forward 4 examples of municipalities with copies of the plans that they use. It's complicated because if somebody's already on the plan, then they leave the plan versus new hires. You know, it's complicated, but to your point,
It
there
works. That's why
are
people do it.
examples out there, and it does work. And you know, there's a direct cost benefit to that for sure.
No,
Yep.
definitely. So this, what we're presenting tonight does not reflect any of those additional discussional items from the other night, the idea David came up with, or are we still revisiting those? Is that where we a hard no on those? Is this, I mean, once or are we just going in assuming that we're not going to get a yes on this, and so we can move it as we see as needed?
As I understand it, we can certainly add those at a later time, whether we add them or not. We didn't feel comfortable adding them, you know, just from administration based on just discussion from last week. But as I understand it, Finance Committee is just going to be approving our roll forward budget at this time. They're not going to be taking any of those additional items into consideration this evening. So certainly we can certainly add them, because I believe that vote will happen later in April.
In procedurally, we're choosing to break it up, but procedurally, we could just bring forth the budget we need to them and ask them for approval and not segment it ourselves, correct?
Yes, I mean, I view our budget as we're asking for 46 million. They're the ones that are segmenting it at this point. They're saying,
Right.
yes, we will fund this
Right.
piece of it, but we won't fund that piece of it necessarily, and we're not taking a vote on that at this point. So really, they're the ones that are segmenting it, not us. So our budget ask is 46.6 million.
So for tonight, we're requesting that 46.
Correct.
That's correct.
So that they'll have to vote no to that and make a, like, what, vote yes to a number we're not asking for?
Possibly. That's what it
Okay,
sounds like.
that's
Yeah.
the piece of it I wanted to know, because I didn't know what I just wanted to know what we were, and I agree, we ask for what we need. I just didn't know what we were asking. I had no idea what we were asking for. So I'm glad we're doing it that way, and then they can vote as they see fit. So the number we put forth was 46,606,959.
Correct.
Okay.
And to be fair, conversations with town were still happening as of this afternoon, chasing numbers. So Michelle worked all weekend, I worked all weekend, and it wasn't settled, and it may not even be settled at the Finance Committee hearing this evening, but we got the information out to you, and it is likely subject to change.
Okay.
Well, not to mention the fact that we have our hearing on Thursday and then our vote on April 7th. So, you know, there's still, even if that April 7th is the end of it, you know, there's still over a week where we're all thinking and crunching and figuring this all out.
So we're presenting in the presentation for the budget hearing for Thursday night, which has to be done by tomorrow, right?
Yes.
We are presenting this 46,606,959, not, it doesn't include the user fees or any of the other pieces.
That is correct.
Okay, will we, during the presentation, can there at least be a slide saying that these additional things have been risen, it's like, just so that the public understands these are things we're still talking about and looking at, or no?
I don't have a problem with that. We're posting a what and why presentation tomorrow that lists all of the asks and what people get for that ask. What do these dollars buy? Why does this contribute to an exemplary education? Why does this improve efficiency? So if we wanted to add a slide at the end, future considerations or future possibilities, Michelle and I can absolutely do that.
Okay. And then where will you make this available? The present, I mean, I know we get it in our Dropbox, but like for the public, where will they be able to get it?
Front and center on the website.
Yes,
Okay.
it will be front and center, and it will also be under the finance section under the budget tab. So we'll
Okay.
have it in 2 different places on our website.
Okay.
And that's front and center on the district, like the district homepage, not the school committee homepage, just to make it clear to everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
I can send it out through Connect Ed as well, if people think that's helpful.
Whatever works. I mean, I don't know. I just know that there's, you know, a couple handfuls of people that every year know they can get it 48 hours in advance, and they want it 48 hours in advance. So I want to make sure that we all know where that's going to be.
They will absolutely have access to it.
By Connect Ed, John, you mean like the Blackboard messaging?
Yeah, like the superintendent's update.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just think, you know, people get upset if we get too many emails, and whereas it's, you know, a handful of people that want to kind of dig into this deeply. I don't know that an email blast. I don't know.
I get concerned when we do things like that, because then if we don't do it next year, they'll be, why didn't you send it out? You're hiding something. So I'm a little hesitant setting precedents there.
And it's on the web, like it is front and center on the website too. So it's not, you know, it isn't even just embedded into the big public school website. It's there.
Now, do we still, at one point we were talking about adding more and increasing the special ed reserve fund. I know that's separate from all this, but what are we targeting that fund to be at?
Really, there's nothing in particular. I mean, we had hoped that part of this 848,000 was going to be able to go into that fund. But diving into our changes that have happened over the past 6 weeks or so, there's no chance. Basically, all of those funds have been committed or are in the process of being committed right now. To be honest, the 250,000 that is going to be in the reserve fund next year, most likely, if this trend continues, we will most likely be accessing that. And hopefully that will meet all our needs, but it's a crystal ball. Certainly things are happening quickly. There is a significant uptick in needs of these students, as it's a mental health crisis in this country right now. And it's in every facets of life, not just with students. So certainly our, out of district needs have reflected what the rest of the state and the country are seeing at this point. So I don't expect that number to go down. What a good number is to have in reserve, it's hard to say. Certainly if someone wanted to give me additional money in that fund, I would be very grateful for it. Whether the town can afford something like that at this point, I'm not sure.
David?
And I think there's been commentary, as happens a lot of times. Well, there's a couple other funds that the plan was to at least adjust them for inflation every year and not have it remain fixed. We do it every year with the storm drains. It's been $330,000 for 20 years. People say, well, that $330,000 doesn't go as far as it used to. And then we have the energy reserve and the utility reserve. So I think it's been acknowledged, Michelle, certainly that these types of things should see some sort of increase. What that increase is, as you say, it's hard to determine. And then when we find ourselves in the situation that we're in now, maybe that will be part of the general override discussion for next year when we talk about all of the structural challenges that the town has. That should be probably one of them that we think about bringing forward for consideration.
Agreed. Great point.
Sarah?
Yes. So Michelle, also with the special education, 2 pieces, are we tracking, and are there any more that are likely outplacement. I know that Bill, when I was on the finance liaisons, Bill used to give us a list of current and then the likely division. I know we still carry that, but are we carrying any of those likelies in this number? And if so, if not, should we? And then the other piece of this is where transportation is such a gigantic driver and fuel costs are very volatile, to say the least, right now. What do our contracts look like right now for our out of district transportation? Are we locked into anything? Did we increase anything to allow for that volatility? And where do we stand with all that?
So right now, we were budgeting for anticipated placements. We no longer have that cushion in next year's budget. We have basically used up all of that cushion. So our number is pretty hard and steady and known at this point. I don't have dollar figures on the unknowns. I do know we have 15 students that are on our watch list right now, which that is a significant watch list. Hopefully they don't result in high ticketed placements, and hopefully we can deal with some of those students in district. So right now we don't have any reserve for next year. In addition, in terms of transportation, our transportation contracts for special education are year to year. We bid them out each year on a quote basis, and we do not have anything locked in for next year. Our costs this year have skyrocketed. I am anticipating we're probably, these are just rough numbers. It's not a full analysis, which I'm working on now. Our transportation is probably going to be about 200,000 over budget this year alone, just because of the amount of transports we have, the fuel increase, the increased cost, let alone without the fuel, and the lack of drivers available.
Yeah, shortage of drivers, yeah.
So
And I just want to thank. Go ahead, Sarah.
I just want to know, is that number for FY22, our current year?
Yes.
So then, and we don't even have so we're carrying our 22 number to 23. We know 22 is going to be, you said what, about 20% over? So we know we're already at a minimum of 20, not meeting that 20% increase. And then on top of that, these numbers with the fuel costs will probably climb higher. So why don't we adjust that? Why don't, we know right now what we're banking on or what we're budgeting is by far not enough. Why don't we increase that number?
Certainly we could. I have a hard time when we submitted requests back in November, increasing them now at this point. We go into every year with unknown costs. We know our costs are going to change. Most of the time I can't say all the time they go up. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. We are going to try to do a few things to limit that exposure. We have reached out to some additional transportation companies that we have never utilized in the past. We're trying to get those into the mix to try to give a little more competition. We are also looking at possibly combining rides. So we try to do that as it is. One of the special education vendors in other districts actually has like a collaborative that they partner with students going to similar placements from similar locations, whether it be a neighboring town and whatnot. I don't think we've actually ever utilized that. So certainly that's going to be something I'm going to look into this year. With last year, we didn't have transportation, and the year before was already preset before I got here. So these are some things we're looking at right now. Our admin assistant in facilities is fabulous with transportation, and she has some great contacts. So we're going to really look at that. So while we are asking for an increase of 65,000, I'm not sure that's going to be enough, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to take some measures to reduce those costs for next year. So hopefully we can offset the other variables that are working against us.
David, does that sound? Sorry.
No, we also have the pending audit that is looking at all of our transportation busing services and looking for ways that maybe we can reduce costs there. So that's due within next couple of weeks, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
David, does that sound in line with what you're kind of budgeting in your day job with increases for the way you guys would. That's a face. That's quite a face right there.
Well, we just reached the point of no return a couple weeks ago, meaning we exceeded our budgeted per gallon number last week, but not for the year, but for deliveries going forward. So for the balance of the year. But starting out the year, it's hard to remember, but we back in August, we were buying fuel at $2.40, $2.50 a gallon. And we've taken a similar approach of putting about a 20% increase into the budget for next year, and being confident, like Michelle said, hopefully there'll be a resolution to some of this conflict going on in the world, and we can hope that fuel might stabilize at least and stop going up. But yeah, it will be one of those. It is probably the biggest unknown that you have, for transportation. That's certainly one of them. And as we often hear from the fire department, and town highway department, it's repairs to vehicles. You can budget for it, but you have a big snowstorm, stuff breaks down, things happen. You get a fire truck certified, it's 15 years old, things need to be replaced, repaired, and you do your best to budget it, but sometimes that might go over, or if you go under, the money that you don't spend on repairs to vehicles can go to your transportation, right, Michelle? I mean, those are kind of like the areas that we're juggling. And fortunately for us, we have had some new buses in the last 3 years, the big 55 passenger buses, as well as some of the smaller, what I think they're 20 passenger, the smallest. So we do have some newer equipment in our fleet, and that will certainly help limit our exposure to repairs. So
I just want to make sure, because I know in the past, one of the most tenuous volatility points has been our out of district placement transportation. And I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a precarious situation with that.
I think I'm excited to hear what you just talked about, Michelle. I appreciate the summary that you sent us about out of district tuition costs that you sent to us. Made that information available, but right, it's not as easy as the St. John's prep bus, but it stops at a couple of towns on the way to Danvers. So you're right. Maybe if students are going to a school in Beverly, that bus that starts in Marblehead might be able to go to Swampscott or pick up in Swampscott and Salem, and we're doing a little bit of cost sharing there. So I think that's a really good option to look at.
Absolutely.
So for purposes of the FinCom discussion this evening, does anybody have anything further to say? And then, just kind of wanting to just be mindful of time, and that, we've got stuff going on in a little bit over an hour.
There's a hand up, so I'll motion for public comment.
Sarah's motion for public comment.
Before we get to public comment, I had one other thing to say, but go ahead.
Okay, hold on. Well, you can say it before we go to public comment.
So I understand, just for people who might be listening at home, I don't know if FinCom had a set approach. I think we might be going after the town, to the best of my knowledge. I did not talk with Alec or Emily today, but for people listening at home, I was going to look. We have our meeting.
David, I believe we're third before the selectmen.
Yeah, so they're going to approve their minutes. The assessor's budget, water and sewer budget, school budget, selectmen budget, and then new business.
Okay, perfect. I hadn't seen that. Thank you for that.
So Sarah did make a motion for public comment. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'm fine for, second.
Okay. Megan, second. Roll call vote, Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron?
Yes.
Sarah Fox?
Yes.
Megan Taylor?
Yes.
And I actually think we lost David. All right, so there's just the four of us on right now. So yes, sorry, that carries 4-0. All right, Catherine Martin.
29 West Shore Drive. I just wanted to go back to that idea of sending out the information in Messenger. And while I understand Michelle's hesitation in that you don't do it every year, if, you know, the objective here is an override and the objective is to get people on board and you're setting it up as what this money pays for, you need to get it in front of parents. If you want them to show up, if you want them to vote, they need to see what they're paying for. I would just say any way that you can inundate people with this information is good. The other thing too is I do find it a little odd that you're going into the budget hearing without, and you still have these kind of big numbers floating that I think you have a lot of support for. So I do agree with Sarah Fox. Getting those numbers in front of people during the budget hearing, whether it's the user fees, whether it's the curriculum coaches, there's support for these items in the community. We need to see them. We need to understand how much they are because you need people to show up. Town meeting will be here before you know it. And you're going to be at the end of that meeting and you need the parent turnout and then you need them again at the election. I would just get the information in front of as many people as possible. Get the number where you need it to be as quickly as possible. And really just start selling it, start putting it out there. This is what you get. This is what we need for an exemplary education. Because I don't think a lot of the younger parents in town realize how much we haven't had for so many years. I mean, David, great point with, you know, the special education fund has not increased with inflation. I mean, these are things that we need to start paying attention to. We need people to understand this. The things that are lacking are a lot of times because of funding. So I would really push you to make communication of this information a priority because you need the support and there are parents out there who want to give it.
Thank you, Katie. All right, I don't have any other hands up. So I think that wraps us up. So we are posted as well as a full school committee for the FinCons meeting this evening. So if anybody wants to come, it's at 7 o'clock. And with that, I will adjourn us at 5:43. Thank you, everyone.